online echo, open and discussion for next year's festival, Greifswald 2021, from Ego to Echo. I'm Ramia, this is Buik, and today joining us is Ahmad from Activestills. Hello, Ahmad.
Hi, Ramia.
Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
So first of all, what is Activestills? I guess you have already prepared a video and sort of like an introduction for us, and we will watch it, and maybe afterwards we could talk about it.
So thank you, Ramia, and good evening, everybody. My name is Ahmad. I'm a 27-year-old journalist and photographer based in the region of Palestine in the Middle East. I come from an educational background of visual journalism, and I've been practicing photography for the past 9 years, both as an individual and later as part of a photography collective called Activestills that I'm going to tell you about today. So this visual talk is mainly about highlighting the concept of activism photography, and it will address one central question of how can we, as people who believe in photography, how can we dedicate it for political and social purposes, political and social struggles in our communities. And to approach that question, I will start by explaining a bit about Activestills, my collective that you may like or dislike. And this is not the main purpose of the talk. I'm just using it as an example, as a case of using the photography tool to serve some struggles in the country. So my collective has been operating in the region of Israel-Palestine since 2005. It has Palestinian, Israeli, and international members, all united to fight what we call the Israeli colonization in the region. And we do that visually by our cameras. So my collective started in 2005, and it emerged from the heart of the Palestinian popular struggle. In that small Palestinian village of Belain, residents started organizing a weekly demonstration against the construction of the Israeli wall that runs through their lands. At that place, 4 photographers met. They were individuals who decided to be there in that community to support its struggle, but in their ways, which is the camera. So the idea was simple, that they wanted to be there in support of that struggle, and they did that not by taking part as protesters, but by documenting it. So what they used to do at daytime is that they document that place, take photographs of what is happening, and at nighttime they used to go to some Israeli public spaces and install exhibitions of that struggle. And they preferred to do it in public spaces for 2 main reasons. One, because they wanted everybody to get exposed to these images, rich people, poor people, people who go to galleries and people who do not. 2, because it did not make sense for the members of the collective to fight the system and ask a permit from it. So since we believe we are fighting the Israeli colonial system in the country, it does not make sense for us to go for a governmental institution and ask for a permission to install our images. So this is our style, a grid of images plus a political statement, but you should know that these kind of images do not last for a long time in Israeli public spaces. It's never acceptable. So besides that, the photographers started providing the community of the struggle, the villagers of Belain, with the images so they can use it in the way they see it serving their struggles. We have a philosophy that says these people who are opening their lives for documentation, these people should get a full access to the archive and use the photographs in the way they want. So And remember here that I'm talking about the pre-social media era. So it was 2005. There was no Facebook, no Instagrams. So these kind of actions of people holding photographs or political leaflets, brochures, these were the equivalent of what we have today. So this is how the group started. It was not really a group, it was just 4 people working together without any theoretical framework. This is what they used to produce from that single village. And after many weeks of coverage, they decided to all meet and decided to put a theoretical framework for the group that became later a collective. And they wanted to answer these questions of, is it a long-term project? Is it a short-term one? Should they just cover that single village, or should they expand their work in the region of Palestine, Israel? And I'm going to tell you about who we are today in 2020 as I'm speaking. So Activestills is just a collective of activist photographers. It was established in 2005 by a group of 4. Now it has something like 14 members. Palestinian, Israeli, and internationals, and all working under certain political conditions. We are not an NGO. We are not a media company. It's just a group of people who use the same tool, which is the camera, and have the same political point of view on the issue of Palestine, Israel. We describe what we do as a decolonial photographic practice engaged in social and political struggles. So we say it clearly on our website that we see ourselves as part of these struggles, but we are supporting, or we are taking part in our way, which is photography. And what we mainly fight visually is what we call the Israeli settler colonial project in the country. So this is what we are challenging with our photographs. In addition to that, we cover some other related issues, women's rights, LGBTQI rights, animal rights, etc. And we work in an intersectional way. So we always try to find connections between all of these issues, because there is a connection in somehow. You can't liberate land, for example, but not women. So after putting that framework, the collective started expanding its work and working with more and more communities in more and more villages under the same philosophy of being with people to document their struggle in support of them. And we always say that we are not helping anybody. We are just there because we feel that it is our issue as well. We live here and our freedom is bound to their freedom. For example, this image that we see here on the screen. So our philosophy, once again, is to cover in support of what we cover. So for the past 15 years, we have been doing this kind of work in the whole country. In addition to some international coverage. So whenever we have a member abroad for some reasons and there is an event or something happening related to the issue of Palestine, Israel, we do cover it. So this is what we are specialized in. And to be specific in your coverage is something very positive. And if you have a look on our archive, you can notice that we deal with the people that we cover as political subjects. You may know or not that Palestinians are always represented in 2 main ways, either as terrorists or as victims. So since we are mainly following activists and protesters, so this is the theme of our photography, like people who are active, people who are calling for their rights and fighting for it. But that doesn't deny that we do have some kind of sad images, because the situation of the country is not that perfect. There is destruction, demolitions, military operations on a daily basis. But we don't have an intention of using that victimization style that I'm going to talk about later. So this is, for example, a daily photo that you can get of Palestinian workers commuting through the Israeli military checkpoints in the country. And here, let me say that we view an importance of our work. So these kind of images are not becoming news anymore. They have been happening for decades, you know. So, and for mainstream media outlets, they are not interested to do that anymore. And they are right, because it's not a newsworthy. It is not a news. And there are many other things that are happening in the region that are considered news. So we view our importance in keeping this documentation up. So we try to do a lot of daily life coverage and highlighted through our platforms. So this is another example of the campaigns of arrests that do happen on a daily basis, and I mean it when I say on a daily basis. So how do you operate? We simply have a website. It's a bank of images that you can go into it and look for certain photographs by typing a name of a place, event, date. We do have tens of thousands of images because we have been operating for 15 years, since 2005. We do publish on social media platforms, and we do cooperate with some magazines and media outlets here and there that we believe in, or those who share the same political point of view on the issue of Palestine-Israel. So here in the left we see some American, Jewish, Israeli websites that we cooperate with, and they are political ones, so they announce their position, their stand clearly to their people. So we do publish photo stories. It's a series of 8 images with 800 words, and that create what we call a photo story. We do publish sometimes on Al Jazeera, Middle East Eye, and some other mainstream names. We do provide activist groups with images because we believe they are working on the same issues we are working on. Plus, we do provide human rights organizations, some of them with images, and this is how we managed to make some income as a collective. So besides that online activity, we have some offline actions such as exhibitions. Here is an example in Berlin, and it was installed, by the way, by people that we don't know. So we always get these kind of emails of people saying, hi, we want to download your high quality images and install them in our public spaces. And we always feel glad about that, and we share it with them. And here is another example from the US. Publications. In the past 15 years, we have managed to publish 2 books. So these books have a certain amount of images under a certain theme. And since we have some Israeli members in the collective, we do get these kind of images from the Israeli communities. And those Israelis who take part in Palestinian protests and fight against the colonization side by side, looking forward towards a shared future of one decolonized democratic state for all. So in addition to that main political subject that we are covering, I said that we do cover some other rights issues such as animal rights. And since we do that in the Israeli society, we do make sure that these activists are finding connections between the struggle of animal rights, for example, and human rights. So it does not make sense for us to cover those Israeli protesters who are fighting for social justice, for example, but at the same time they take part in the colonization of the region and somehow. So it's a bit complicated. I'm not going to go through it, but I'm just trying to highlight how politics can affect the practice of photography. So in addition to these issues, you may know that here in the country there is an issue of refugees who do come from many African countries, and they have been facing troubles. So we did some coverage on that as well, because once again we find connections between all of these struggles. So before finishing this part, allow me to tell you a bit about Palestinians and photographs. Since the issue here in the country has been going on for 73 years at least, since 1948. So people do deal with photographs, images, more than posters because it's a very long-term one. So you can find people taking frames that are placed and designed for a wall in their houses and taking it to a political action. Here we see an example. And whenever they are done, they take it back home and put it again. So it's part of their daily life inside home, and it's part of their weekly or monthly political activities that they do take part in. Here we see an example of a living room of a Palestinian family. They put a big image of their prisoner from their family. And here we see another example of a lady bringing her husband's images to the hospital room to celebrate having a baby who came after smuggling sperms from her husband who's imprisoned in Israeli jail. Another example of someone showing his father while celebrating building their house, and right now it's being demolished by the Israeli forces. Someone from Gaza looking at family members that he lost in one Israeli airstrike. So this kind of political usage of frames of photographs in the country really inspire us to continue producing images, dedicate them for more and more communities to use them in the way they think it's serving their struggle. And if not, if this style is not happening anymore, and it is decreasing, I'll be honest, because of the social media era that we are living. So we view our photography as a continuation of the protest. So when we cover a protest that is taking place for a couple of hours, for example, uploading images of it is the continuation of it. So this is how we view our practice in another scenario. And let me tell you here that Activestills is not a unique example. So there are many political photography collectives in the world. Here's an example called Afropix. It's a South African one. It used to be active in the 1980s. It had white and black photographers, those from the colonizer community and the colonized community, and they were just united because of one thing, which is fighting apartheid in their way, which is the camera. So after the decolonization of the country, Afropix reached to its end, and what remained from it is these kind of images that you can find if you go to their archives. Some of it is online, you can find it on Google, which is a very rich material for the sake of history. In Activestills, we do feel privileged that we have been documenting the Palestinian struggle for the past 15 years. We do feel happy that we managed to archive it in a very professional way, very well categorized, available online for public. So yeah, this is what we have been doing in the past 15 years, and we also do hope to reach an end one day, because we don't wish this situation to keep alive forever. We hope to witness a moment of decolonization where, when everybody living in this country between the river and the sea share equal rights after the decolonization of the country. So once again, that part was not really about telling you what is Activestills and what we are doing, but I was just trying to use an example, a case that I'm involved in, hoping to inspire you about how can you use photography for struggles in your own societies, in your own places. For me, when I joined Activestills, it was an inspiring model. I joined them 8 years ago. I was something like 18, 19 year old. And I like their visual style, I like the issue that they are working on, and because I was a university student in my first year doing a journalism program, so Activestills for me was that place where I managed to find all of these combinations together. And I can tell you that it was started by a group of four students who were 19, 20-year-old, and they couldn't imagine that it will last for 15 years, but it is still alive. So this is how things can start. So you just need to make that decision, have that belief. So let's get to the practical question now. What do we need to dedicate photography for struggles and issues in our societies? So one, you need to be a photographer, and I'm going to explain what do I mean by this in a minute. Two, you need to have an issue that you are looking forward to dedicating photography for. Three, you need to develop a political approach plus a visual style of your photography practice that suits the issue you are working on. So what I meant by being a photographer is not only knowing how to operate the camera. Yes, of course, you should know how to operate the camera. But what is more important, I think, is having that belief in the tool of photography. We all know the saying of one image worth thousands words. This is because images educate, images inspire and influence people. Photography is our space to visualize our thoughts and share it with others. So they can change, but not in a direct way. Like photography itself cannot change, but it inspire people to react to the content of your photography. And if you have that as a public phenomena, and it happened many times in the history, yes, you are going to change and you are going to have a public reaction towards that issue. So we all have been following what has been happening in the United States recently. So just because one short video that was uploaded online, the whole public opinion in the US reacted, and they all went to streets to fight what they call discrimination against African Americans. So having a change is an accumulative thing that you can't expect when to happen, but as long as you are trying with your tool, of course you are making change, even if on some individuals. So photography is also your tool to fight misrepresentation and underrepresentation of issue. And please note that all of these terms are relative. So what you think is being misrepresented by media may be viewed by others as very well represented. It's okay, this is politics. So point number two was to have an issue that you can dedicate your photography for. And let's have an example here. Let's say that you are working on the issue of refugees in Europe. So we all know that this has been a phenomenon in the recent years. Many people are being active in order to support these people in their new places. And let me say here that having an issue itself is not enough if you want to practice activism photography, because you also need to develop a political perspective, a political approach of it. So some people may support the issue of refugees just because they want their countries to commit to some international conventions of refugees and apply them. But while some others could go beyond that and think from the perspective of the former colonies, because they know that most of these people are coming from places that were not decolonized properly, and they feel the responsibility of Europe towards these people to this day. I'm not trying to tell you which one is correct, which one is not. Both are different politics, but you should know that any of these political decisions will affect the way you will visualize your issue. So it will affect the way you will caption your photographs, the way you will contextualize them. So having a political approach will 100% help you to create a visual style and decide your features of your visual practice. So can we call that journalism, or is it activism photography? So to approach the answer, you should know that both are about highlighting stories to inform people, but the difference can be touched by answering these questions that we see on the screen. And I feel that it is clear for you now what activism photography is. So the whole process of taking the photograph and the intention, the vision is in support of a certain issue, while in journalism it's different. In journalism, you are covering something, you are taking a photograph of something because you are approaching it from a professional, unbiased, neutral point of view, hoping to inform people. So both are okay. Both are respectful styles. You can do both. I'm not trying to say that this one is better than the other, but the most important thing is to be honest with your audience. So if you are biased, if you have a stand from a certain issue, you should make it clear to people instead of manipulating them. So how is that being different from the work of agencies? So you may know that most of the photographs we see on news websites, newspapers, and other places are mainly provided by these big names, Reuters, APA, AFP, and many others. And these people work in this style. So they hire people across the world and they ask them to take photographs of events that are happening in their countries, and they upload them to one platform. So media outlets can subscribe, pay, and download these images and use them. And they could be pro or against a certain issue, you know, so it's just a paid news service. It's a business in somehow. And that is very different from the work of activist photographers. So activism photography is very different, as you may have noticed. So how can you sustain your project since you are not making money? You can make money out of it. It's your decision. Of course, you need money to sustain your voluntary project, even if it's voluntary. I'm going to tell you a bit about our style. So from the first day, we said that we don't want Activestills to be an NGO. We don't want it to be a media company. And we don't want any official papers work. We don't want salaries, you know. We want to keep it simple so it can stay alive. So we all work in the media market. We have full-time and part-time jobs here and there, and Activestills is something we do in our spare time. And it's a lot of spare time because all members are here because they want to be here and they want to work in this project, in this collective, simply because they have the belief in that. So we love what we do. And yeah, this has been a sustainable model and I feel happy about it. Of course, you will still have some costs for a website, for transportation, annual things, you know, and you can get it from people who donate. We have a donation button on our website. There are some subscribers who get images and pay to support us. There are many grants that you can get. But to summarize, we prefer to keep it simple. We prefer to keep it a collective to avoid any financial obstacles in the future. And it has been successful because we don't have so many costs. So yeah, think of that. Think of that if you are going to work as a collective or even as an individual, because nobody can live without money. You need it to sustain your project. Positionality is something we should all think of in our photography practice because we are usually covering the story of the other. So we should always ask ourselves who we are in terms of class, gender, color, and other things. Are we considered from the oppressor community? Do we have the right to speak on behalf of these people? Are we reinforcing oppression in somehow in our photography practice? All of these questions should be approached, and this is not to put a limit for collaborations and activism, but by answering all of these questions, you are simply making sure that you are approaching your issues properly, politically speaking. And of course, I'm speaking as an activist photographer who cares about these politics of collaborations and identity politics. So compassion fatigue is a term that is usually highlighted by academics. And it's when someone stops feeling sympathy with an issue due to a high amount of sad and frustrating images, it could be bloody images, that person has been receiving for a while. So we in Activestills are always looking for empowering images instead of looking for images of victims. So as I said before, we try to avoid that style of victimizations. And since we are following activists, we try to find empowering images that has hope, because hope is what viewer of your images need to react. So you always need to find the hope, and you always need to leave them some hope in your images so they can react. If you kill it, if you fill your platform with bloody, sad images all of the time, so this is a frustrating thing. So this is a very criticized practice because it simply kills the belief of change in the viewer of your images. So change. Are we changing anything with our photographs? The answer is yes and no. And once again, you should not expect to upload a photograph or a video and you expect a change to take place on the following day. You should know that informing people is a very, very long-term process. And what is bad about it is that you don't know about the reaction of people, because you upload it online or you publish it somewhere and you are not there to know what is happening in his or her mind, you know. As long as you are trying, as long as you are working, be sure that you are contributing in somehow, such as many other contributors in each case. And you should believe in the accumulative work of all of us. So you contribute, I contribute. So nobody knows when that turning point is going to happen. Nobody knows how, but what we are sure about is that it is going to happen one day, due all of that accumulative work that everybody is doing. And we are feeling privileged to be part of this. And we feel very happy about the model that we managed to develop and that has been alive for the past 15 years. So I'm encouraging everybody interested in photography and believing in it to start thinking from that perspective and answering that question of what issue should I dedicate it for? How can I dedicate it for? So these answers can lead you to establish something that can change the place you are living at. So thank you for listening.
So Activestills is just a group of activist photographers who are operating in the region of Palestine, Israel, and they have a political stand from the main issue here in the country. But their stand is being done through their way, which is the camera. So it's not a media company, it's not an NGO, it's just a collective of some photographers. And this is what has been bringing us together for the past 15 years.
This is sort of like a question that we ask everyone we interview. So how did you become an activist? In your case here, how did you hear about Activestills and how did you get involved?
Yeah. So since I have been living here for most of my life, something very natural here that you get interested in politics, because it's simply about politics is your daily life. We have an issue here that has been going on since at least 1948. And when I was at the last year of high school, I started get more and more interested into politics. And I decided to study journalism in university, aiming to dedicate it to speak up about my political opinions and the issue that we have here. So I was a fan of Activestills when I was 15, 16-year-old, a kid. I used to go to their Flickr account that was a platform even before Facebook and Instagram. I used to go there, collect their images and download them because simply I liked their revolutionary theme, if that's the right term. I liked the issues that they were working on, and it became a dream for me to join them. So but I met one of their photographers by chance. She was a French photographer. We met in a protest. That was in 2012, so 8 years ago. And she invited me for a coffee and we talked. Then I found that Activestills is the place where I can find all of these combinations together. So my love for journalism, photography, and politics. So yeah, this is what I've been doing with them for the past 8 years.
And for you, what's the difference between photojournalism and photoactivism?
So look, like I studied journalism at the university and I do believe in it. And at the same time, I believe in photoactivism. So that was a conflict in my professional life for a while, until one professor told me that, Ahmad, you can do both as long as you are very clear and honest with your audience. So photoactivism is mainly about taking a stand from something, using or by dedicating photography for it. So by my photographs, I can argue for a certain issue. I can explain my opinion, my politics. Well, it's something very different for a photojournalist or a journalist who's that neutral person who go to the field in order to collect information from the right and the left, from people who are pro something and against something, and offer a package of balanced information to people so they can make up their minds. In photoactivism, you are pushing people towards thinking in a certain way. So the common thing in between is maybe the tool, because we both are using cameras, but the function is totally different. And in the world of journalism, what I'm doing is considered a violation if it's being done by a journalist. So that's why in the field of media activism, it is ethical, it is okay, as long as you are telling your people what you are doing, because it's not honest at all to claim that you are a professional media outlet, but from under the table, as we say in Arabic, you are trying to bypass some biased information.
So apart from heresy and given your objectivity, can you name other differences between visual activism and photojournalism, or does it really sum that up?
I think that's the summary of it. And if you take that point, you can find many sub-points. But let's try to talk about the practice of, like, what do we do with the photograph after taking it? So I was trying to say the intentions, the vision. So for a photojournalist, he will just submit it to his media outlet and it will be published online. He's not allowed to advocate using it. He's not allowed to put it in a political activity, you know, because if somebody see that, for example, Reuters is providing activists with photographs, it's, you know, it's going to be a problem because Reuters is presenting itself as a professional news agency. So the whole post-production practice is different for an activist who's mainly taking these photographs to start using them later for campaigns and etc. And as far as I know, there are some restrictions on agencies like to sell their photographs for organizations that are not considered as media outlets, because this is considered as part of political activity or so. But I'm not the best one to explain about these things. You really need someone coming from these agencies explaining them to you guys.
And concerning Activestills, what do you exactly do with the photos? I know that you put them in public use. What happens after? Is it the or the people, or how does it happen?
Yeah, so we have our website, which is the bank of images. And we always invite activists to use them in any way they think it's useful. And whenever somebody email us and say, hi, we have a protest, we have a campaign, we have something that we want to use these photos for, we feel happy. This is why we do exist, you know? Sometimes we get approached by some NGOs, organizations, or I don't know what, some media companies. We tell them you are welcome as long as your politics match with us, but you have to pay a small fees because this is how we live. We are non-profit, we are not even an NGO, we are not registered. But we need, by the end of the day, a bit of money for the annual fees of the archive. It's a lot because like we have tens of thousands of images that have to be online all of the year. So it is manageable. This is how we manage. So that's how people approach us. But what we as photographers do is that each one of us has some connections here and there with magazines, campaigns, and we try to like collect these images and create something out of them as an individual or as a group. So we do publish, we do try to organize some offline exhibitions here and there. So it's a combination of all of these things together.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that member of 2012. Can you tell us a little bit of how has it been like being an activist before and after social media and online activism in general?
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't really witness that era of Activestills when Facebook was not there. I joined later, but this was a question that I always asked to my colleagues, like, why did you used to do street exhibitions? So for the Israeli members of the collective, they were unhappy with what the Israeli mainstream media is doing. And they used to call it misrepresentation of the Palestinian struggle. But in 2005, how can you challenge that? Mass communication was not available to anybody. So the only way they came up with is just to go to streets and install these photographs at midnight. And that was their only way to reach to the public. It's not as effective as Facebook, of course, but that was the only solution. When internet started becoming more and more common, they started using a platform called Flickr. It's something that you can upload your photographs on and caption them. But nowadays we have the treasure of social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, and I really feel that people of this age do not really feel how important they are because they have not witnessed the era before. Like to have a tool in which you can reach to thousands, millions while you are home sitting in front of a screen. It was something exclusive for TV channels and newspapers and radio stations, and now it's in everybody's hands. And this is why we should think as young people, as activists, of how can we use these things for good issues. And I know that good issues is a relative term, but it's okay. We should always work for what we believe in. So for the past 15 years, we have been growing in that term since we are exploiting in any medium or platform that we can have access to. And this is how we managed to build our fans and audience who are always supporting us.
And how was the reaction, especially for social media, how was the reaction of governments, if I may say, to your work, especially like putting up at midnight? How was it?
Yeah. So to be honest, the Israeli system is not very strict on media. So you cannot be jailed because of something you are writing. You can only be jailed if they consider consider it as a call for protest, because any protest that is happening here is illegal from their perspective. So as long as it's not classified as incitement, you are okay. We are aware of that, and we are aware of other legal concerns, and we try to, to stay safe. So this is giving us a space to practice our work. But at the same time, that does not mean that you are 100% safe, because almost all of our members got arrested, got detained. I was detained for 3 times, not because they really want to silence photographers, but it is just the idea that they are not ready to give anybody a privilege if they are being part of a Palestinian protest, because the crowd is illegal for them. And once they declared that area as a closed military zone, that could be in front of your house, by the way, everybody needs to evacuate that area, and journalists could be arrested, even medics. Here we are ruled under an Israeli military law, and yeah, this is why we have witnessed some troubles. Like, we got some of our equipments confiscated, but we managed to get them back. But I always try to be honest with people who are asking me this question, and to make that distinguishment about why they are doing that. I'm not trying to tell them that, no, it's the North Korea model of silencing people, etc.
What has the feedback the Palestinian and communities?
Okay, since there are Israeli members, anti-colonization Israeli members, it was a bit weird, and it's still a bit weird for many Palestinian communities, This is not something that is happening a lot. You can find, I don't know, a few tens, a few hundreds, a few thousands, I didn't count them. You can find that number of Israeli activists who really come and work with the Palestinians to decolonize the country, hoping to achieve what we call one decolonized democratic state. And that happened in South Africa, for example. This is the model that they used to solve their issue. From the Palestinian eyes, that was a bit weird, because they are only used to Israeli soldiers. I don't know how much you know about this country, but there is a strict separation reality. Like, people do live next to each other, but there is always that fence. So you keep seeing the other community from behind the fence, like very heavy armed, escorted by the Israeli army. So yeah, it's always a weird feeling, and I understand. Some of the Palestinian communities do not feel comfortable, even when they know about the ideas of these Israeli activists. And they will tell them, look, your politics is good, but please remember that you are living on my place, and I'm a refugee in another part of the country because you are being there. And I understand. My grandmother is a refugee, and there is an Israeli living somewhere where she used to live. So this is why it is a sensitive issue. But for me personally, I don't really care about national identities. I don't really care about being Palestinian, Israeli, Muslim, Jewish, whatever. As long as we are on the same page, politically speaking, as long as we are aiming towards a shared future based on the decolonization, so why not? So we hope to see more and more of these models in the future, because resisting from within, and I'm talking about the Israeli society here, is something very effective. Because they are the privileged people who do have more freedom of movement, more rights. They are not under the military law. And this is one of the advantages of our cooperation, because, and I will finish by this sentence, we do live in the same place, we do live in the same area, but because I hold a green ID as a Palestinian, which is ruled by the military, by the Israeli Military of Defense, I'm not allowed to move across the country as the Israeli photographer does. So this is how we managed to produce images from the whole country.
And question is challenges of activism. You managed a few. My question is more in general, what other challenges, as we can see that in the age of media, photos can just be taken out of context, misinterpreted or misused, and have you faced any of those situations?
Yeah. So this could happen as well with activist photographers, but less likely. You know why? Because we caption our images in a very clear way, so there is less chance in manipulating them. The images themselves are very clear and they speak themselves. And simply, we do not sell our photographs and we do not give them to anybody approaching us. We really have to make sure what they're going to use it for. So yes, it happened that somebody got an image and later we discovered that our politics do not match, and we simply contact them and it's peacefully solved. So this is not a problem. I think the main challenge of media activism is that you can mainly be approached by people like you, by people who are on the same page like you, politically speaking, because you are announcing your stand, you are announcing your position, and if you are on the other side or have a totally different opinion, you will see it as a bullshit, sorry to say. And I realized that we are not being able to approach a diverse amount of people. Like anybody who's pro-Israel across the world will see us as a group of maybe terrorists, although we are doing photography. But it's okay, this is how media activism look like. And here we can see why journalism has a plus in that aspect, because as a journalist, if you are really balanced and if you are offering balanced information to people, you can really approach by people who may agree or disagree, people who are looking for information to make a stand or make a position, make a political decision. But the thing that they can do is that they can't advocate, they can't be the lawyer of someone, they can't speak up their politics. Once again, both are okay. I do both and I do believe in both, but it's important to pick up one and follow its ethics.
You're very active with the Palestinian cause, but do you also get involved with other causes? So, for example, the Arab Spring or other such movements?
Yeah. So we do not really do work outside of the country because we prefer to stay focused on our topic. And we realize that we are being followed by people on Facebook, Instagram, and other platforms simply because they are interested in the Palestinian-Israeli issue and they want to keep following up. So that could be a bit confusing for people if we do a bit in Turkey, a bit in Iraq, for example, although we are not privileged enough to be there. I'm not allowed to be anywhere in the Arab region without visa. So, yeah, but this is not our main vision. We prefer to stick on what we are doing. At the same time, here in the country, there are many other social and gender struggles, for example, women's struggles that are happening. And we say it clearly in our website that freedom is not only about fighting colonization. You cannot liberate land, but not women. And we know that women suffer a lot in this part of the world. It's even worse than other places. So we do try to follow these struggles and find connections in between the main topic of our coverage and these issues. So for example, tonight at 7 p.m. there is a protest in Haifa by a Palestinian LGBTQI groups who are going to protest and say, hey, you can protest against colonialism, but not LGBTQI violations. This is what we are trying to say, and we are really going to cover this because simply they are saying what we want to say. They are bringing these connections because our society is full of contradictions. We are not the best, even if we are colonized. Like you can find people who go to protest and call for their rights from the Israeli government, for example, but when they go back home, they abuse their sisters, could be their wives. And for me, this is a contradiction because freedom is one concept and you cannot divide it.
Last question, it's still you made it pretty clear that you rather focus on the cause in hand, but something for the future maybe, like do you see yourself collaborating with other initiatives and collectives from all over the world, or like what's the future of Activestills?
Yeah. So we really hope to dismantle the collective this year if the issue is over. Trust me that none of us are happy about what has been happening here in the country for decades. And this is why we are alive, to try to do something against it. But once it's over, but I don't think it's going to be over very soon, not in my generation. But when it's over, Activestills will become just a piece of history. And we will try just to save our archive for the future if they want to learn about the horrible things that was going on here in the country and try not to apply them in other places. This summarizes the conflicts that we have inside each of our members in Activestills. We really do love what we are working on, but we hate it at the same time because it is very sad and it is very frustrating. And there is always that one moment of each of us when we think that, what is photography? It's not changing anything, let's stop it. But at that moment, you have the other member coming and explaining that we should keep patient, keep trying, because it is going to end one day, hopefully.
Ahmad, thank you so much for answering the questions and for the introduction video. We wish you all the best and hope to meet soon.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to speak this time to some young initiatives because this is targeting young people in Germany who may like or dislike my politics, but this is not the point. Yeah, the point is hopefully to inspire people to start working for other issues. You have a lot in Europe to work on, I believe.
That's